Hey everybody, in this lesson I'm going to talk about power chords in case you haven't heard about them or whatever. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the basic power chords, between the first fret and the second fret. And then I'm going to show you, explain to you about suspended power chords. And then I'm going to show you about drop D tuning. Okay, so let's get started with this. Power chords are pretty easy. You pick a fret, okay? I'm just going to pick the third fret as a start point here, okay? So we take our first finger, put it on the E string, and then our ring and pinky we put on the fifth fret on the A and the D string, okay? So we just cover just the three strings with the power chords. So it's the E, A, and D string. E is covered with the first on the third, and then the A and the D are covered with your ring and pinky on the fifth, okay? Okay, so that's a power chord, okay? And it doesn't matter where you play it, any fret. Okay? So that's your low E power chord. Alright? Now I'm going to show you the other one, going with the root string being on the A string. It's basically the same kind of pattern. So we'll take our third fret as a start point on the A string. You put your first finger on the third fret on the A string, then you take your ring and pinky and you cover the D and the G string on the fifth fret. Okay, that's a power chord. So lower with the root E and then with the root A. And same is true with that, you can go anywhere. So those are your two very most basic power chords, and like I said, you can travel up and down the neck of your guitar as much as you want with those. So now I'm going to talk about suspended power chords. Okay, so to make a suspended power chord, all right, we take in, we're going to start on the third fret again. For first finger on the E string on the third fret, then we're going to take on the fifth fret, put our ring finger on the A string, and this one's kind of a stretch. I don't like to do these in this form. I like to do them better in drop D, but I wanted to explain them to you in the regular tuning. And then we take our pinky finger and put it on the D string up on the 7th fret, okay? So that's a suspended power chord. Now if you see my hand here, it's like ready to break in half from stretching. So there's the regular power chord. And then if you skip a string with the D, or skip a fret with your D string, that makes the suspended power chord. And that was with the root E. Now same thing with the next one. Okay, so we go down to the A string, start point, third fret. So here's the regular power chord. Now we skip with the G string and go up to the 7th fret, and that would make a suspended power chord here. Here's regular. There's suspended. Now as you can see, that's a stretch with your fingers versus just... Okay. Now, and you can come up and bounce back and forth between the strings, and you can come up with chord progressions. I have a lesson in there that kind of helps you making chord progressions, but that's in a drop D, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So just to give you an example of what power chords can do, okay, I'm going to play for you a little riff that, I know, and, you can see it. Turn on some distortion, okay? So here we go. Okay, and you can travel anywhere you want with that. You don't have to just stay around, or you make your own configuration of power chords together. Punk rock sounds really good like this too. Okay, so that's those power chords, okay, just your basic power chords. Now I'm going to turn the distortion off and talk about a drop D tuning. There we go. Now, for drop D tuning, which is, a lot of times I like to play in drop D, you take your low E string and you're going to drop it down to a D, okay? And on your strings, the third string in, your E, A, and D, okay? So we have our E, and then our D, which is the third string in. Now we take our tuner on the low E, and we pluck the two of them together, and we tune down until the low E matches the sound of the D. Okay? Now what that does for us is when we tune down to a D, before I get into it, so you match them up that way, and then to maintain that tune of being in a drop D, instead of using your typical 5th fret, okay, to do the tune, it doesn't make any sense there. So on your 5th fret here, the rest of the strings remain the same. Okay, so you move your low E string up to the 7th fret, and that would be your tune with the A string. So when you're in a drop D, you're up on the 7th fret with the E string to match the tune, and then everything else is the same. Okay, so now what that does for us is when we play in a drop D, we end up making it so that, instead of using the pattern for a traditional power chord, now a power chord is 1 fret with your first finger, and it's all up and down. So it's just your first 3 strings as a power chord. And this is kind of, instantly gratifying for a beginner because, it opens up and makes it a lot easier for you to play, power chords and things. Because, when you first pick up a guitar, you get a little frustrated sometimes, with how hard things are to learn. And then as you start going along, you get something like that, and it's instantly gratifying. So let me throw some distortion on with that and, mess around with that for a minute. So and you can go all over the neck with it, just your first 3 strings, your E string, A string, and D string barred is a power chord now when you drop down to a D. Okay, so there's that. Now the reason I had taught you about the suspended power chord before is because it's a real big stretch to do it when you're tuned up to an E. When you drop down to a D, your suspended power chord, okay, we're going to start on the 3rd fret. Now you take the E and the A string and you put your first finger on the 3rd fret on the E and the A string. Now to make that suspended power chord that was a stretch like this up top, all we do is we take our ring finger and we put it on the 5th fret on the D string. So now this gives us a suspended power chord, which when we had it tuned up, we were doing this to make a suspended power chord, which was, it stretches your hand out. So there's a suspended power chord. I mean, if you use your A string as your root, you're still going to have to do the stretch, when you're in a drop D. But the low E, it's just any fret, skip 1, and then cover it with your ring finger with the D string. And I like using the suspended power chords in some of the riffs I come up with and messing around because, like any suspended chord, it adds a depth of sound into your music progression. One example I used it in was one of the rock progression riff on Random Jams. The very last chord that I end on is a suspended power chord, and you can kind of see, like if you did a fade out on that, you can see how it gives you a depth of sound, or it just sounds cool, So mix them up as you're playing with them. Use your power chords and play around. Let me play around for just a second and show you, I guess. Okay. So I hope that's useful, and enjoy, and I'll see you guys later.